He gets coffee?
I'll buy Phil's, you go get it.
Cool, and I'll buy food.
Anybody else want
Give me a feta omelet. Feta omelet.
I'm just going to pass the phone around.
I had a pound of steak last night, so I'll probably let's go feta omelet. Bro, you don't even know about that. Okay, you probably eat 4 ounces.
Oh man, I'm going Brazilian steakhouse.
Shit, you probably get lean cut red meat.
Hey, says the guy, what? Who's a little too fat?
Put fucking Kerrygold and everything. Cereal, Kerrygold, vegetables, Kerrygold. I swear, God, I get on it. I put Kerrygold on top of my Kerrygold.
Hey, you guys are my background. Shut up.
Have a great podcast today, brother.
Here you go. That's what you want.
All right, we are going to talk about how showing up is half the battle and the other half is really the most important ingredient for your success in everything, right? For exercise, for your work, for your relationship, for your nutrition, the whole thing. And the word I'm going to come back to a lot today is intentionality. This is one of the things I think is probably the most overlooked and underused tool when it comes to pretty much everything that we're doing in our lives, and wonder why people complain about the lack of results. It's not so much about actually just the work that you're doing and what you're doing. It's kind of how you're doing it, right? And how the why influences the how. Something that I say to my team all the time when we talk about kind of just obviously more specific to training is, you know, all trainers will tell you what to do when you think about personal training. You know, hey, you're going to do deadlifts, 5 reps, 5 sets. Some good trainers, not all of them, will even tell you how to do it. This is how you do a deadlift with the correct form so you don't blow your back out, those kind of things. And then the really good, the experts, the coaches, and the kind of the top level trainers are going to tell you the why, right? Why are we deadlifting and the importance of those things? So when you think about the what, the how, and the why model, this applies to everything. This doesn't apply to exercise, obviously. This is something that can apply to all aspects and all avenues of life. So today I'm going to kind of get into a little bit more of the how, because this is something that I personally see all the time, and it just blows my mind how people are not putting enough energy and effort into those things. I personally come from a camp of someone that likes to work smarter, not harder. You know, I always give my dad a hard time about this, is my dad was a very hardworking man and did a lot of kind of laborious tasks and jobs his entire life, and now the old man's broken. So sorry about that, Dad, but you know, he's not completely broken. He still golfs, he still works, so I don't want to throw him under the bus there. But for me, I always liked the idea that, yes, working hard is going to be part of the journey no matter what, because to get to the top level of anything in life with, you know, yourself, your goal, your business, like, yeah, you're definitely going to need to work hard no matter what. But how can I do this in a more efficient manner and work smarter, right? So in business, it's delegation. And, you know, with training and nutrition, everything else we're going to talk about, it's actually the intentionality of everything that you're doing within the moment of actually doing it. Those are the things that I think should be kind of become more important and be talked about more to people. Because, yes, going to the gym and doing your reps and doing, you know, lifting weight and just kind of being very mindless about everything you do will give you some level of result. But doing it with intentionality and complete focus and being present in the moment is dramatically different in the results that you're going to be able to provide for yourself, right? So that's kind of what I want to talk about today. So hope everybody's having a good day. Hope everybody has some fun plans for the weekend. So let's jump right into it. So I'm going to kind of spin this off from the top with exercise first, and then we're going to kind of go down and trickle down the 6 dimensions as always of what we talk about with kind of all dimensions of health as always. You know, and something that I'm going to talk about with the team today that we're going to kind of be recapping a lot of is when you look at the dimensions of all health, we talk about from the top, movement and exercise. Then we look at nutrition. Then we look at sleep. Then we look at stress management. Then we look at your community and your environment. And then we look at mindset. So these are kind of the 6 areas that I'm going to kind of focus on, as always, on every single conversation, and starting from the top and working myself down. So when you think about the word intentionality, right, a lot of us when we're on kind of this new journey of weight loss or exercise or nutrition or new job or new relationship, sometimes more of the focus is just getting there and the consistency behind that. And this is something obviously I've talked about in, earlier podcasts, that the importance of consistency and how to stay consistent is so important to it. But at the end of the day, being consistent and doing half-ass work is almost just as bad as not even going sometimes, right? Especially from a result standpoint. So when you think about like kind of the 4 areas why people go get, trainers or coaches or nutritionists or therapists or help in general, and I've talked about this before as well, that, number 1 is knowledge, right? So if you don't have the education or the know-how to get yourself from point A to point B, whatever that goal might be for yourself, obviously going to be pretty impossible there, right? Number 2 is then going to be structure. Do you know how many reps you're supposed to be doing? Do you know when you're supposed to be switching up the workouts? Do you know how to progressively overload your training? Do you know how many calories or macro, or how many hours of sleep, or whatever it is that you're actually measuring, or kind of, your ambition is behind that? That's the structure. 3 is the accountability, right? Which, you guys have heard me say this once again a million times, that I can give you the best plan in the world and all the education in the world. If you don't do it, it don't work. Simple as that. And then the last one's motivation, right? So when we think about motivation for clients and all people, that we need to think about, motivation is a derivative of progress, right? So if you are making progress in any area of your life, you are going to be motivated by that progress. And that motivation is going to snowball, right? And when we have motivation on our side, we can leverage this energy, right? I personally love moments, though, of having low motivations, because those are times for us to really kind of sharpen the skill of discipline. But motivation is also something we need to leverage. It's not like, let's just like forget about motivation and just focus on discipline. Discipline is the foundation, because that's going to be something that with or without motivation should always be there. Motivation is something, though, that we can leverage as kind of an additional fuel source for us to give us that extra energy that we need, right? So we want to have motivation. And in order to have the motivation, we want to have results. And in order to have results, you need to have the education and the plan and stay accountable to it. Simple, right? Well, simply said, I guess would be a better way to say that. So when you think about exercise, to kind of start here, there's a lot of people that go to the gym, and we see this all the time, and I'm going to give you kind of just reference to us as always. Like the way Wodify, the system that we use for, performance tracking works, is it, gives you a little gold star if you did more weight, or if you got a better time on the conditioning workout, or if you did more weight, or basically same weight with more sets, like more volume overall, blah, blah, blah. So any level of progress that's improvement on performance, it's going to give you kind of a little fancy gold star. So that's something that I generally try to kind of, focus on with clients, is like, hey, we should be trying to achieve these little gold stars, in a sense here, in quotations, because that's showing you that you have some level of progress there. So now the thing to remember is, obviously, results are not linear. When we all know that, right? Like, results are definitely not linear, and that's something that we can't say that every single week we're going to put 5 pounds extra on the bar, or we're going to be able to reduce our time by 10 seconds or a minute, or things like that. Like, that is something that you need to be realistic enough to understand that, like, it's not linear. So just understanding that from the get-go, but overall throughout a cycle, so if I'm doing a 6-week training cycle, I definitely should be squatting more than what I did on week 1. I definitely should be doing faster times than what I did on week 1. So there should be some level of improvement inside of the plan. Maybe not day to day, and maybe even sometimes not week by week, but there should be some progress, right? And if we're not seeing that progress, this is kind of what today's conversation is about. If we're not seeing that progress, the question is now like, well, what is going on, right? Because like, what am I missing? Because you are here, you're doing your workouts, you're showing up for it, you're going through all the reps, but you're not either pushing yourself, you're not motivated enough, you're not kind of connected to your body enough, and there's some kind of disconnection here. And this is where a lot of plateaus kind of hit for people. So your intentionality behind what you do, one thing to think about when you think about weightlifting is your body doesn't know if you're holding on to 300 pounds or 250 pounds. It understands tension and force to a certain degree, right? So what I mean by that is I can make a 100-pound deadlift feel like 300 pounds based off execution. So what I mean by that is, am I engaging as much muscle? Am I engaging as much tension as possible in every single rep? And that's kind of what intentionality means, right? Is like, are we actually connected to every single rep that we're doing with our exercise? Because that's a very big difference. If you said, hey, Corey, you're going to do 5x5 today at 250 pounds. right? I can make that 250 pounds and that 5 sets and 5 reps feel very different depending on how I'm doing it. Am I like just bouncing off the floor, touch and go, not creating a lot of tension and stability, not focusing on creating as much kind of focus and tension through the legs first and finishing with the hips, or am I just kind of mindlessly doing it? The execution will be very different, and guess what? When execution is different, so are the results. So even with the same setup, structure-wise, and the same weight even, the results can be different based off intentionality, right? So are you in the present moment? Are you giving it all your effort, right? So for me, one of the things that I try to get, I'm pretty hard on clients with this. I tend to be a little bit more brash than most people on this, is like showing up late to sessions, being on your phone, chit-chatting, taking a long-ass time between sets, not wanting to push yourself on weight, just kind of being like, today that feels good. You know, that is literally a recipe for your body hitting a plateau. And if your goal is just to go join the gym for the social aspect of the community, sure, like that works. But if your goal is obviously to get stronger, to burn body fat, to build muscle, to build confidence, to feel better about yourself, to live a long time, to not be in pain, to look really good, then yeah, you need to be pushing yourself in order to actually promote growth, and that growth is going to involve a lot of discomfort, right? And if you're very mindless with everything that you're doing because you're never in the present moment, you're always thinking about what happened or what you should be doing or blah, 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 there's a huge disconnection there, right? Now, the same thing with food. We've talked about this last month when we kind of got into a lot of the nutrition podcasts, is like, are you just eating to eat? Or are you a little bit more mindful of what you're putting into your body, right? Are you a little bit more aware of your cravings? Are you a little bit more aware of kind of how you're chewing and how you're taking your time with your food? Like every single kind of subdivision that I talk about on this podcast and every platform, it's the same shit, right? One of the things I always kind of, my girlfriend, you know, bless her heart for this one, she was always on my case in the beginning with this for good reasons, that the phone is a very... I think the phone is probably one of the biggest distractions that all humans have in this planet, right? And if I didn't use my phone for Gmail or for business, and this is something that I personally try to take a lot of kind of change and more of a change of direction with kind of how I use these platforms to making sure that they're for business, they're for educating my clients or future clients, and they're not just for personal kind of, you know, like look at me, blah, 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 how I used to use it. And I still, like, we're all kind of victims of this myself. But I always laugh at this because, like, on dates all the time, it's funny because you'll see people, if you just look around when you're out on a date or at a restaurant or out and about in public, a lot of people are sitting down, they're on their phones, they're just like, there's such a big disconnect, right? Like, you're not there. You're not present. You know, and I think when we come back to this kind of intentionality thing, we have to remember that goes for your relationship too. That goes for being at home. And, you know, when the commonality between intentionality and presence is obviously a huge thing, right? Like, these two things are kind of derivatives of each other. And if you're not in the moment, you're not doing what you should be doing, right? And we see this with work, right? Some of this myself, I see this a lot with employees too, like showing up to work and just not being there, just being checked out because something else is going on outside of work, or I'm on my phone when I should be doing something else or whatever, right? All of these are different things that I kind of call wearing your mask in certain place. Like when I'm at the gym, you should be at the gym to work out. When I'm at home, I should be there to, you know, wind down or spend time with my girlfriend or my dog. When I'm at dinner, I'm there to eat or conversate and be social. You know, if I'm at work, I'm here to work, right? So when you kind of become less present and become very mindless with everything becomes very dull, right? Like, you're not going to see a lot of results from everything you're doing. Your work is going to feel like this is where all these people are running into burnout. These are all these people who are going to the gym and not seeing results. These are all these people that are jumping on diets and not having success. These are all these people feel like they're not in the right relationship and it's not necessarily the thing externally that's the problem. It's the internal of you not being there, not being present, and not doing things with intention. Everything needs to be done with intention, right? This is something that I tell my team all the time, is like, you showing up and training a client and telling them what to do and counting reps for them. Why the fuck would somebody pay you $100 an hour for that? Right? Like, explaining the why and coaching and getting the fuck off your phone and getting like more present in what you're doing with these sessions is the thing that's going to make you an expert in all places. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't think that a lot of people talk about wanting to be successful and wanting to be the best at what they do, but a lot of people don't, I think, actually want that because they're not willing to do the work. So you might want the end result, but you don't want the process. And, that's something, when it comes to money, people want more money, but they don't want to do more work. People want more results, but they don't want to do more work. So think about it this way. Why is liposuction so much more expensive than personal training? Because it saves time, right? And the less time and work that's involved, the higher the value of perceived service or product will be. This is why Amazon is $1 trillion company. These are why all these companies, when you look at kind of the commonality behind these things, is the less work's involved. Now, you have to remember, this is kind of my biggest problem with most of these newer age companies and this kind of philosophy and everything kind of being the prime lifestyle that we live in. That's not how fucking health works. Health takes time, and health takes work, and health takes practice, and health takes repetition. And most importantly, it takes you being intentional with everything that you're doing. Because if you're disconnected from everything and you're just expecting the results to land on your lap, like, reality fucking check. That's not how it works. Okay? So, I wish people can be a little harder on themselves, right? I think, and this is something I think I'll do in a separate podcast, I think the self-love movement is kind of a little bit of bullshit to me, because being easier on yourself because the diet culture has failed you, or exercise is hard, and, you don't need to work that hard, and, working more than 40 hours a week is overrated, and if it's not your goal, different story. But if your goal, obviously for me with this podcast, is for you to be your best self and be the most successful version of yourself you can, then you have to get used to being in a uncomfortable position. You have to get used to discomfort. You have to get used to pain. You have to get used to being insecure and being uneducated and pushing yourself past these boundaries, because that's where the growth is at, right? And that's where you grow. And for you to be the best version of yourself, that is part of the process. And so many people that I talk to, clients and employees and people around me all the time, they're looking for the path of least resistance. Now, don't get me wrong. A human's designed to survive, not to thrive. So the human, the genotype of being a human is the path of least resistance. It is just the survival mechanism that we all fall into. But, I was listening to a really interesting podcast earlier this week, and it was talking about how America is on pace by 2030 to be 90% overweight. Not obesity, but overweight, right? And for me, it's just staggering to hear that, right? It's holy shit, that's a crazy big number. 90% of people are going to be overweight. And less than 5% of the people in this world, in this country, I'm sorry, are actually consistent with their activity level and their nutrition and stuff like that. So it's if we're looking at 90+% of people not taking care of themselves, it's no wonder people are unhappy, stressed out, overweight, living paycheck to paycheck. And my job, for me, is to not be that person. So I do exactly the opposite of what everyone else is doing. And me personally, what motivates me in my life is making sure that the people around me don't fall into the same trap that every single other person is. This is why I do what I do, and this is why I will retire doing this what I do, is because I love coaching and I love helping people become happier, healthier, better versions of themselves, but making sure that I'm not fishing for you. My job is not to do the damn work for you. My job is to give you the tools to do the work by yourself. I'll educate you. I'll give you a plan. I'll give you some motivation pep talks, but at the end of the day, the work has to come down to yourself. And the more intentional you become with every single thing that you do in your life, the more efficient you'll become with everything, the more successful you'll become with everything, and the better results you'll have with everything. And that in return will give you motivation, that will give you everything that you're looking for. And you have to remember that the results are hard in the beginning, right? This is one thing I think a lot of people forget about, especially with exercise and nutrition, is if you've had bad habits for your whole life, for 5 years or 10 years or 1 year even, it takes time to unwind and unpack a lot of these bad habits and turn them over into good habits. And it's something that you guys have heard me say this a million times and forever on, that we're slowly working our way on a continuum of less and better. I don't like the good versus bad mentality when it comes, especially when I talk about diet to people. Don't think about foods inherently being bad or good, thinking about these things more of I need less of this and I need more of this, right? And it's the same thing I think about when I'm shaping my community and my environment, how I work with stress management, my sleep stuff, my exercise, obviously. Don't put things in the camp of good or bad. Put things in, the less or more kind of continuum, because we're just slowly trying to slide this thing to the right and stay away from being the left, right? So today's a little bit shorter. I just kind of wanted to kind of briefly touch on that because that was a big conversation I had with a client earlier this week, and I think it's important for everybody to understand that it's not just what you guys are doing that's going to get you successful in every area of life. It's how you do it. right? And how you do everything requires you being intentional, requires you being present, requires you being focused. And the more you can do those things, the less work you actually have to do because you're becoming more efficient with these tools. You shouldn't have to work out 3 hours a day. You shouldn't have to diet your face off. Like, there should be flexibility and balance, but that requires you being really efficient with the work that you are doing. And if you guys are concerned about getting yourself motivation for the intentionality, this is something I've talked about once again a million times. The why is the driver of the how. So if you feel like you're not really motivated to get the how, or you're not really intentional, and it's like, A, make sure you're in the right environment. So if it's hard for you to show up for work and be motivated by work, then maybe you're not in the right job. Or maybe you're just being a princess about these things and you're becoming lazy, and the work that you haven't done for every area of your life is starting to spread around every area of your life. So make sure that why, that driver, that motivation, because as you get to the end of the day, we are emotional beings, but we're backed up by logic. So don't try to make logical decisions and expect that to stick. Try to make emotional decisions that have logic behind them, because that's going to be the thing that keeps you guys motivated, because the why is where the stickiness of everything comes in life, right? So I had a good conversation with one of my coaches yesterday about this, that the why, like last year I had a lot of doubt, right? There was a lot of bullshit that I dealt with being a business owner during a pandemic, and, between losing employees and outside opinions and government shit, it kind of rattles you sometimes and kind of makes you second guess some things. But what I always came back to was my why. Why do I do what I do? And I do what I do because I want to make you a happier, healthier, better version of yourself. And I want to make sure I give everyone the tools that I've learned, and sharing those people, sharing that education, those tactics with people, so they have structure, and making sure that you guys have enough motivation to stay accountable to that, right? And the only way you stay accountable to that is by having a plan and by having results. So think about those two things, right? All right, guys, that's my short little spiel of today. I hope everybody has a good weekend the rest of your day, or whatever day you're listening to this. As always, if there's anybody that you think really will benefit from listening to this podcast, share it with somebody, leave a review. I know a lot of you have been texting me and leaving reviews, so I really do appreciate that. This is just an easy way for me to kind of talk for 20 or 30 minutes to give you guys a little extra education, so you guys can take this and run with this and make yourself a better version of yourself, right? All right, guys, take care.